Because most of my demos, they are not working today, I am thinking of showing you one of my uh, application developments tricks that I generally go and Google things like this. That say if you're building an Angular application, I'm going to say Angular e-commerce and GitHub, right? And generally, it is going to come back with the result of a big enough application. So this application here, it seems like it's an Angular application. It has e-commerce functionalities, and it has features like it gives you product list, product detail. It has multiple sort statement, and then there are decent number of check-ins as well. So there are like 711 commits, which is pretty decent. You can copy this. You can also look at the number of contributors. So there are 17 developers who are actively contributing to this particular GitHub repository. So I've copied the URL already, and now I'm going to go back to the Angular folder, and I'm going to do git clone. I don't have to. And I'm going to do this, and let's do code dot, not dot, Angular free, and let's see how these guys are building their application. All right, once again, the same folder structure. For any Angular application, the starting point is package.json. Now they have a bunch of scripts. We had like 5 scripts for starting and stopping and testing. They are doing a lot more than just starting and stopping the application, right? Post install, they have certain activities. As a bundling activity, they are calling a special function that bundles their application. They have a lot more dev dependencies, the production dependencies, and a lot more dev dependencies as well. So a good starting point. They have their own angular.json file, which is going to customize their application. Once again, with these two identified, if we go to the SRC folder, we are going to see the index.html file, and their base URL is also set to href slash, and they have a bunch of meta elements. They are going to become information for the search engine and the browser itself. In the body class, they have the app root defined. Inside that, they have a dev element. This is the first time that I'm looking at this application as well. And they have this code defined. Okay, one thing that I did not tell you, that you cannot have script tag inside any of the um, HTML pages. So I'm going to, so inside these templates, you cannot put a script tag, right? If you put a script tag here, Angular is simply going to ignore it. If you want to put script in your custom Angular application, you will have to put it inside the index.html file, right? This is outside Angular scope because it is app root, and app root probably is the app.component.html first selector, right? So with this selector defined, they are setting up the initial theme for the application. And then let's go ahead and run this application real quick. I'm not even sure if it is going to work. But then let's find out how they are starting their application. And over here, I'm going to search serve, and they have multiple options. So I can do start, and I can do probably with mock and probably with this solution. I'm just going to copy this part. And I'm going to say npm and paste it here. Did you mean one of these? I don't know if package and script needs to be mentioned here. If that doesn't work, I'm just going to say npm start. And this is definitely giving error because there is no start matching at the moment. So I don't know how to start this application. ng start dev custom. Let's just do ng serve -o. All right, let's do ng build. All right, I'm not sure how to start this application, but then one of these combination, it is going to trigger that thing. Let's just go ahead and continue looking at the application. Like any other Angular application, they're going to have an app folder. And to pick up that thing, you can always go to the main.ts and look for the bootstrap function here. This bootstrap function is going to call the app module. I'm going to hit F12 and close out of this build window. The app module has the app component as bootstrap. Bootstrap is going to be the first component of your application. They have multiple providers, which is going to create the service injection part that we saw through ng generate service. Declarations, it has only three components, the app component, the checkout header, and the checkout footer. And it has multiple import statement like route module for routing in the application and some initial navigation, some other routing settings, right? It has another module for which there is another for route defined. So inside, it has two type of routing in the application, right? The first routing is probably for the application itself, and second is for store specific, right? They are defining something for production setting, a couple of other settings that probably we can ignore for now. If I go to the app component has multiple setting elements. And then if I look at the app component.html, this page itself, it has like one div statement and it has a section defined here, right? This thing probably is going to show the progress of say a download or say money transfer, and it is going to set the spinner value. Now this ng progress, this is a built-in Angular directive in the form of element that you can include inside your application. App header, because app is the prefix of this application, we saw in the app root as well, app component as well. App header is the header component that they have created. Then they have a main section, and inside main, they have the router outlet. So anytime we click on the link, which is going to get generated through this app header, they are going to replace this part here, and the application is going to take effect. And then this third URL here is once again, it depends on the current URL. So if the current URL is set, we are going to see a header and footer. If that URL is not set, it is going to do something and generate that data. All right. So to understand what kind of routing is available, we'll have to go to those three components. If I scroll all the way up and look at this routing module here, it is going to come from some routes collection. This routes collection here is defined in /app.routes. So let's look for that file, and it is present here. One thing probably that you should notice that there is no .ts mentioned here. Okay, so with that defined, if I come to root now, there are a bunch of constants, path, and then load children. This is aggressive. This is lazy loading. So it identifies that for a specific route, it requires a couple of modules. So for an empty path, it is going to require this. When the path has an S, it is going to load the search module, right? And then these modules, they will mostly be present inside these components. So landing module, search module, checkout module, there are three modules inside this application. And if I go to the landing folder, I'm going to see that module file once again, landing module. And then I hope you remember saying that there is bootstrap. Because it is a secondary component, it does not have that bootstrap element, but then it is defining a bunch of module of its own, and it is picking up all the components. Right? The components themselves, they are defined here. So landing module is bringing its own component. The first is landing component, the about us component, the FAQ page. If we go to the definition of these, they are sitting inside the component folder inside landing. And notice that there's probably a one-to-one mapping between these folders and these component files here, right? So let's go back to this folder structure. Let's look at the about us component. They are not using CSS styling. They are using SCSS styling, which gives you better control over styling. The component itself is pretty empty. It does not have much. So it will only have this template URL. And if you go inside the template URL, it has the About Us section, which is empty at the moment. Now, if we look at other HTML pages, notice that they are not putting a lot of HTML code. They are using nested components, and inside the brands page, it is using app-lp-brand. And once again, they are passing parameters. They are doing binding using these square brackets. So they're going to bind to this property. And then if we copy this and search it across the solution, it is going to match to a selector statement. And that selector statement is where it is defined, right? And then I'm going to go back to Solution Explorer, select this file. And if we look at this brands component file, this is where we have just a section defined. And there are multiple attribute directives. I'm so sorry, not attribute directive, the other type of directive that modify the structure of the page. So they're going to make this like visible. And then I told you that there's an expression that can go inside ngF. So we were doing length for component. Had we put not equal to 0, we would have not, I mean, the need for creating that condition variable, we would have not needed that. So this ngF is going to have an href element, and it has a class attribute, and it is saying 100 plus plants in stock. And then it is generating the list of those brands. And then if you remember seeing this, we saw it inside this component here as brands. So we can communicate across components using this square bracket, and this brands here is going to get bound to this member here. And then this is eventually going to get connected to this variable here, brands. Probably they have a brands attribute inside the component file. And that brands attribute, once again, is a collection. And this collection is going to get populated using some service. So it is getting injected a platform ID, and this platform ID is used for generating the value. All right. So this brands collection is picking up the value from this component, and it is taking the collection. So the collection is getting defined in the ng-on-init method, and that's how that collection is going to get populated, and the rest of the application is going um, to generate the rest of the component. And you're going to see only these limited set of patterns in any Angular application. They have a bunch of modules and they have a bunch of components defined. These components, they have associated HTML element, and using different type of binding and injections, you can extract values from sources, and the binding is going to take care of the generation of the UI elements. Right. So I encourage that I'll share the link for this particular Angular repository. I encourage that you look at these longer application and try to figure out how these applications are tied up together. You are already familiar with the core concepts of Angular, that it has 4 important components: the component itself, template, directive, and dependency injection. So with combination of these and knowledge of such applications, you will be able to consume these applications in a better way. All right, so it is already 10 on the clock. So we can end our session for today. If you guys have any question, you can ask it now.